You feed rogues, Evelyn, and one day they'll drag you down with them. The words followed Evelyn Carter across the frozen town square like a curse. She kept walking anyway, her boots crunching through 2 inches of dirty snow, her head lowered against the sharp December wind. The paper sack in her arms was still warm from the bakery. Fresh rolls, a container of soup, the last blueberry pie Mrs. Harper had sold her before the woman noticed where Evelyn was going. By then it had been too late to take it back. Behind her, the butcher laughed. Waste of good food, he called. Those rogues should learn to fend for themselves. A few people smiled. One woman pulled her little girl closer when Evelyn passed, as if kindness could spread like a sickness. Evelyn tightened her grip on the bag until the paper bent beneath her fingers. She was used to the looks, the whispers. Strange girl, Loa, daughter of a trader. In Black Hollow, people never forgot. 5 years ago, her father had hidden an injured rogue in their house during a blizzard. The man had stayed only one night. By morning, he was gone. By evening, Evelyn's father had lost his job. Their neighbors stopped speaking to them, and the town decided exactly what kind of family they were. Her father was gone now. Her mother, too. Only Evelyn remained in the little apartment above the abandoned laundromat at the edge of town. Alone, quiet, forgotten. At least, that was what everyone believed. The laundromat looked empty from the street. Dust covered the broken windows. A rusted sign creaked above the door whenever the wind picked up. Nobody looked twice at it anymore, which was exactly why Evelyn chose it. She slipped inside, locked the door behind her, then crossed the dark room to the old vending machine in the corner. She pressed 3 buttons in the right order. The machine clicked softly, then the floor beneath it shifted. A narrow staircase appeared below. Warm light floated up from the darkness. So did the smell of coffee, soup, cinnamon, old wood. Home. Evelyn descended the stairs. The room below was small, maybe 20 feet across, hidden beneath the city like a secret heartbeat. Mismatched tables filled the space. Old string lights hung from the ceiling. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace near the back wall. Farouk sat inside tonight, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes. 2 brothers barely older than 16. A man with a limp who always sat in the corner and never spoke. They looked up when Evelyn entered. Relief passed over their faces so quickly it almost broke her heart. "You're late," one of the boys said softly. Evelyn smiled for the first time all day. Mrs. Harper burned the first batch of rolls. The room laughed. Small, gentle, real. She set the food on the counter and began serving bowls of soup. The older woman wrapped both hands around her mug like she had forgotten what warmth felt like. One of the boys nearly cried when he saw the pie. Nobody here asked questions. Nobody cared where you came from, what pack rejected you, or what mistakes followed you through the dark. Down here, for a few hours, people could breathe. Then the wind howled outside. The lights flickered once. A second later, the hidden door upstairs slammed open so hard the sound echoed through the basement. Every face in the room went still. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor above. Slow, uneven. Then came the sound of something falling. Evelyn's pulse jumped. Nobody should have known about this place. She set down the soup ladle and climbed the stairs alone. The laundromat was dark except for the moonlight spilling through the cracked front window. Snow drifted across the floor. Near the doorway, a man stood with one hand braced against the wall. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black coat dusted with snow. Blood stained one sleeve. His hood hid most of his face. For one long moment, he simply looked at her. Then his knees gave out. The man hit the floor before Evelyn could reach him. 1 second, he had been standing there, huge and dangerous in the moonlight. The next, he was on one knee with one hand pressed hard against the cracked tile, his breathing rough and uneven. Snow melted in his dark hair. Blood dripped slowly from his sleeve onto the floor beside him. Evelyn froze. Every instinct in her body told her to run. There was something wrong about him. Not wrong in the way the town talked about rogues. This was different, bigger. He felt like a storm trapped inside a man. Then he looked up. Silver eyes met hers beneath the shadow of his hood. Cold, sharp, familiar somehow. though she had never seen him before in her life. "Please," he said quietly. Just one word. It should not have mattered. But there was something in his voice. Not weakness. Exhaustion. Like he had been carrying the weight of something for too long. Evelyn stepped toward him before she could stop herself. "You are hurt." "I am fine." The lie came too quickly. He swayed where he knelt. Evelyn sighed softly. "You are bleeding through your coat onto my floor." "You are not fine." For a second, she thought he might argue. His jaw tightened. His shoulders stiffened beneath the black coat. Then the strength seemed to leave him all at once. He closed his eyes. 5 minutes, he muttered. "I just need 5 minutes." Evelyn looked toward the basement door. The rogues downstairs would be terrified if they saw him like this. Even injured, this man looked dangerous enough to make anyone nervous. She should have sent him away. Instead, she slipped her arm beneath his. Heat hit her instantly. He was burning up. "Come downstairs," she said, "before you pass out, and make this even more difficult." His eyes opened again. For the first time, she saw surprise flicker across his face. "You should not trust strangers." Evelyn gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Then it's a good thing I stopped trusting people a long time ago." He was heavier than he looked. Over 6 feet tall, broad across the shoulders, solid beneath the coat. Yet somehow he moved carefully, like a man trying very hard not to frighten her. By the time they reached the basement, every conversation had stopped. The older woman near the fireplace stared openly. One of the teenage boys nearly dropped his spoon. The stranger noticed immediately. Evelyn felt him pull away. "I can leave," he said. "No," she answered too fast. The word surprised both of them. A strange silence followed. Then Evelyn cleared her throat and pointed toward the tiny storage room behind the counter. "Sit down. I need to look at that arm." He hesitated. Then, slowly, he followed her. The storage room was barely big enough for a shelf, a folding chair, and the old first aid kit she kept beside the sink. The man sat heavily in the chair, while Evelyn knelt beside him. Up close, he looked older than she first thought. Maybe 30. A scar cut across the edge of his jaw beneath the hood. His hands were rough, his knuckles scraped, his fingers too steady for someone in this much pain. "What is your name?" she asked quietly. A pause. Too long. "Luke," he said at last. The name did not fit him. Evelyn could not explain why. She carefully pushed back the sleeve of his coat. The cut along his arm was deep, though not dangerous. He flinched the moment her fingers brushed his skin. Not from pain. Something else. His entire body went still. The room felt suddenly smaller. Warmer. Evelyn looked up. He was already watching her. Not her face. Her hands. Like he had never seen kindness before. "This is going to sting," she whispered. "I know." She poured warm water over the cut. Luke inhaled sharply. The sound was low, rough. For one terrifying second, his eyes flashed brighter. Not gray now. Silver. Almost glowing. Something wild moved behind them. Something ancient. Evelyn pulled back. The room fell silent. Then it was gone. His eyes looked normal again. Human. Tired. "Who are you?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Luke looked at her for a long moment. Snow tapped softly against the basement windows. The fire cracked in the other room. Upstairs, the wind moaned through the empty laundromat. "Someone who has spent a very long time looking for a place like this," he said. Luke stayed in the storage room for almost an hour. By the time Evelyn finished wrapping his arm, the fire outside had burned low. The others had gone quiet. One by one, they slipped upstairs into the snowy night until only the old woman remained near the fireplace, pretending not to watch the stranger through the cracked door. Evelyn stood at the sink, rinsing the blood from her hands. Behind her, Luke had not moved. "You should sleep," she said softly. "There is a cot in the back room." "I should leave." His voice sounded distant now. "Tired? Then why are you still here?" Silence. Evelyn turned. He sat with his elbows on his knees, his dark coat open just enough to show the black shirt beneath. The shadows from the fire moved across his face. They caught the line of his jaw, the scar near his mouth, the strange sadness in his silver eyes. He looked like someone who belonged in another world, not in her tiny basement with its crooked shelves and second-hand chairs. "You help them every night?" he asked. Evelyn leaned against the sink. "Most nights." "Why?" She almost laughed. Everybody always asked that question. Nobody ever understood the answer. Because somebody should. Luke looked down at his bandaged arm. Even rogues. Especially rogues. The old woman near the fire gave a quiet hum of agreement. Luke glanced toward her. They tell stories about you in town, he said. I heard them outside. Evelyn stiffened. Then you already know what people think of me. I do not care what they think. The words came so quickly, so simply, that she forgot how to breathe for a second. He looked up then, straight at her. The room seemed smaller again. Too warm. Too close. They are wrong, he said. No one had ever said that before. Not in 5 years. Not since her father died, with half the town still calling him a traitor. Something sharp twisted in Evelyn's chest. She looked away first. You do not even know me. No, Luke said quietly. I think I do. The old woman suddenly stood from her chair. I should go before the snow gets worse. She pulled on her coat, then paused beside Evelyn on her way to the stairs. Her tired eyes moved from Evelyn to Luke and back again. A strange little smile touched her face. Be careful, dear, she whispered. Storms do not always come from the sky. Then she was gone. The basement felt too quiet after that. Evelyn busied herself wiping down the counter. Luke watched her for a while without speaking. Finally, he stood. You should lock the door tonight. I always do. No. His voice had changed. Lower now. Sharper. Tonight. Evelyn turned slowly. He was standing near the stairs, his body tense beneath the black coat. Listening. She held her breath. At first, she heard nothing except the old pipes rattling in the walls. Then came the sound of a truck outside. Doors slamming. Voices. Male. Loud. Her stomach dropped. Luke crossed the room in 2 steps and blew out the lamp beside the basement stairs. Darkness rushed around them. Stay here, he said. What is happening? Someone followed me. The words barely left his mouth before heavy footsteps echoed through the laundromat upstairs. Evelyn's heart hammered so hard it hurt. 3 men, maybe 4. She could hear them moving across the broken tile. Laughing. I know somebody came in here, a voice called. She knew that voice. Didek Hale, the local beta's younger brother. Cruel. Drunk half the time. Come out, sweetheart, he shouted. We just want to talk. Evelyn took a step back. Luke did not move. Something about him had changed again. The exhaustion was gone. The weakness, too. He stood completely still in the darkness, one hand at his side, his eyes fixed on the basement door. Silver. Bright. Dangerous. Then Derek's voice came again from directly above them. Found the hidden door. Evelyn stopped breathing. Beside her, Luke smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile. It should have made her feel safer. Instead, it terrified her. Derek yanked the basement door open. Cold air spilled down the stairs. 4 men stood above them, snow clinging to their boots, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Derek grinned the moment he saw Evelyn. There she is. His gaze swept across the basement, the tables, the empty bowls, the blankets folded near the fireplace. His smile widened. You really did it. You turned this place into a shelter for rogues. Evelyn forced herself to stand still. Leave. Derek laughed. You did not get to give orders. One of the men stepped farther down the stairs. The beta is going to love this, he said. He always said there was something wrong with her. Evelyn's cheeks burned. Not from fear. From shame. That old familiar shame she thought she had stopped feeling years ago. The kind that settled in her chest every time the town looked at her like she was something broken. Derek took another step. You know what happens now, right? We tell the pack. They shut this place down. Maybe finally throw you out of Black Hollow for good. Enough. Luke's voice cut through the room like thunder before a storm. Derek blinked. It was the first time he had really looked at the man standing beside Evelyn. Luke stepped forward slowly, leaving the shadows near the wall. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. She said, leave. Derek barked out a laugh. And who exactly are you? Luke did not answer. The flashlight beam moved across his face. For the first time, Derek's smile slipped. Something in Luke's expression made all 4 men hesitate. He still looked exhausted. His coat was still stained with blood. Yet none of that mattered now. He stood too still, too calm, like he already knew how this would end. Derek recovered first. He folded his arms. You are a rogue, same as the rest of them. No, Luke said quietly. I am not. The room went silent. Evelyn looked at him sharply. There was something different in his voice again. Not the tired stranger from before. Not the wounded man she had helped. This voice was colder, older, used to being obeyed. Derek must have heard it too, because his face darkened. I do not care who you think you are. He pointed at Evelyn. She has been hiding criminals under this town for months. She has been feeding hungry people, Luke said. There is a difference. Not to me. Derek moved down one more step. Maybe when the beta gets here, he can decide what to do with both of you. Evelyn's stomach dropped. The beta. If Mason Reed came here, everything would be over. He hated rogues even more than the rest of the town. Worse, he hated her father. Hated anyone who reminded him that kindness made him look cruel. She grabbed Luke's sleeve before she could stop herself. Please, she whispered. You need to go. If they find you here. Luke looked down at her hand, gripping his coat. Something unreadable flashed through his silver eyes. Then he covered her fingers gently with his own. Warm. Steady. I'm not leaving you. The words hit her harder than they should have. Nobody had said something like that to her in a very long time. Upstairs, another truck door slammed. Heavy footsteps crossed the laundromat floor. More voices. Derek smiled slowly. Too late. Then the basement lights flickered once. Twice. The room seemed to darken around Luke. His jaw tightened. Every muscle in his body went rigid. Evelyn felt it before she understood it. Power. Massive. Terrifying. It rolled off him in waves, filling the tiny basement until it was hard to breathe. Derek took a sudden step back. One of the other men looked pale. What? He whispered. Luke closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them again, they were no longer silver. They were bright, impossible gold. A deep voice echoed from upstairs. Derek, report. Mason Reed. The beta had arrived. Derek turned toward the stairs, then back toward Luke. His face had gone completely white. Who are you? He whispered. Luke looked at him without blinking. You should have listened when she told you to leave. Mason Reed descended the basement stairs with the slow confidence of a man who had never once been told no. Snow melted from the shoulders of his dark coat. Two-pack enforcers followed behind him. The moment he stepped into the room, his eyes found Evelyn. Disgust curled across his face. I knew it, he said softly. Just like your father. Evelyn felt the words hit like ice beneath her skin. Around them, the basement had gone completely still. Derek stood near the stairs, pale and silent. The others had moved back without even realizing it. Only Luke remained where he was, one step in front of Evelyn. Mason noticed him then. His expression hardened. Who are you? Luke did not answer. The golden color had already faded from his eyes. They looked silver again. Human. Calm. Yet something dangerous still lingered beneath the surface. Mason narrowed his eyes. You are not from Black Hollow. No, Luke said. I'm passing through. Then you picked the wrong town. Mason moved farther into the room. His gaze swept over the tables, the blankets, the empty soup bowls. Every trace of kindness Evelyn had built down here suddenly looked small beneath his stare. You think this is noble? He asked her. You think hiding rogues makes you some kind of hero? Evelyn swallowed hard. They were hungry. They're dangerous. No, the words slipped out before she could stop it. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to keep going. You just need them to be dangerous, because then you do not have to feel guilty for turning them away. Mason stared at her. The room seemed to stop breathing. Evelyn had never spoken to him like that before. Maybe she had never spoken to anyone like that before. For a second, she thought he might laugh. Instead, his face went cold. You have your father's mouth, too. The old shame rose again. Sharp. Familiar. She saw herself at 16, standing in this same town square, while people whispered that her family was weak. Broken. Worthless. Her father had stood beside her then. He had taken her hand and whispered, kindness is not weakness, Evie. The world only says that because it is afraid of people who still choose it. She had not thought about those words in years. Not until now. Mason stepped toward her. Luke moved at the exact same moment. Smooth. Silent. Suddenly he was standing between them again. Mason stopped. Their eyes locked. silver against dark brown. Something invisible passed between them. Recognition. Mason frowned. Have we met? Luke tilted his head slightly. No, it was a lie. Evelyn knew it instantly. She did not know how. She only knew the room felt strange again. Too tight. Too full of things nobody was saying. Upstairs, more engines rumbled outside. Headlights flashed through the cracked windows of the laundromat. One of the enforcers near the stairs looked uneasy. Beta, he said quietly. There are more trucks coming. Mason barely looked away from Luke. I called them. Evelyn's heart dropped. What? This place is finished, Mason said. By morning, every board, every chair, every filthy little hiding place will be gone. The words seemed to echo through the basement. Evelyn looked around the room. At the old fireplace. The crooked shelves. The faded Christmas lights she had hung 2 winters ago because the boys downstairs said they missed home. This place had been the only good thing she had left. Luke looked at her then. Really looked at her. He saw the tears she was trying not to let fall. The fear. The heartbreak. Something changed in his face. The calm disappeared. Beneath it, for the first time, Evelyn saw anger. Not loud anger. Worse. Quiet anger. The kind that came from someone who had spent a lifetime being obeyed. Mason turned toward the stairs. Bring everyone down, he called to the men above. I want every rogue in this room brought outside. Luke's hand closed slowly at his side. The basement lights flickered again. Then every bulb in the room went out at once. Darkness swallowed the basement. Someone upstairs shouted. Another voice yelled. The trucks just stopped. Then, through the darkness, a new sound rolled across the town outside. Deep, powerful, a howl. Not from one wolf. From dozens. Mason went completely still. Derek whispered one terrified word into the dark. Royal Guards. The basement remained dark for 3 long seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then headlights swept across the cracked laundromat windows upstairs, bright white against the snow. Doors slammed outside. Heavy boots hit the frozen ground. Not the rough, uneven noise of Mason's men. This was different. Controlled. Precise. The sound of people who already knew exactly where they were going. Derek stumbled backward into the wall. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Mason spun toward the basement stairs. For the first time since he walked into the room, he looked uncertain. One of his enforcers rushed upstairs. He returned only seconds later, pale as the snow outside. Beta, he said, his voice shaking, the whole street is surrounded. Then another sound filled the laundromat above them. Slow footsteps. One pair. Calm. Measured. They crossed the broken tile floor overhead, then stopped directly above the basement. Luke lifted his eyes toward the ceiling. Evelyn looked at him. He was different again. The exhaustion was gone completely now. The wound in his arm no longer seemed to matter. He stood tall, still one hand behind his back, like he had been waiting for this moment all along. A voice came from upstairs. Deep. Formal. Your Majesty. Every person in the basement froze. Mason's face lost all color. Derek made a small choking sound. Evelyn stared at Luke. No, that was impossible. Luke closed his eyes briefly, almost like a man disappointed that a secret had ended too soon. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. There was regret in his face now. Evelyn, he said quietly. Her heart stopped. Nobody had ever spoken her name like that. Soft, careful, like it mattered. Please, she whispered, tell me they are not here for you. He did not answer. Upstairs, more voices echoed through the laundromat. Secure the exits. No one enters. No one leaves. Mason backed away slowly. You. He looked between Luke and the basement stairs. You cannot be. Luke turned toward him. Something cold settled over the room. Not cruel. Not angry. Worse. Absolute. I warned you to leave, he said. Then he climbed the stairs. Evelyn followed before she could stop herself. The laundromat looked completely different now. Black SUVs lined both sides of the street outside. Men in dark coats stood in the snow, forming a silent circle around the building. Each one wore the silver crest of the Royal Guard over his chest. The entire town had gathered across the street. Neighbors, shop, owners, the butcher, Mrs. Harper from the bakery. All of them staring. All of them silent. Luke stepped into the center of the room. Snow drifted through the broken doorway behind him. One of the guards approached at once and held out a dark wool coat trimmed in silver. Luke took it without a word. Then, slowly, he reached up and pulled back the hood he had worn all night. Gasps rippled through the crowd outside. Evelyn could not breathe. She had known he was handsome before. She had known he looked like someone out of another life. But this was something else. The scar at his jaw, the dark hair touched with snow, the silver eyes, the impossible stillness. She had seen his face before, not in real life, in newspapers, on the television in the diner downtown, on the front of magazines at the grocery store. King Lucian Blackwood, the Alpha King, the ruler of every pack for 300 miles. The man people whispered about like he was part king, part storm. Mason Reed dropped to one knee so fast he nearly slipped on the wet floor. Derek followed him. Then every other man in the laundromat did the same. Outside, the entire street bowed their heads. Only Evelyn remained standing. Lucian turned toward her. The whole world seemed to disappear. The guards, the town, the snow. There was only him. Only those silver eyes fixed on hers. "I came here for a reason," he said softly. "But I did not expect to find you." Mason looked up sharply. Confusion flashed across his face. "Your Majesty," he stammered. "She is nothing. She hides rogues. She—" Lucian's gaze snapped toward him. The room went silent again. "She fed the people you abandoned," he said. "She protected the people you hunted. She showed more courage in one winter than you have shown in your entire life." Mason lowered his head at once. He looked suddenly very small. Then Lucian looked back at Evelyn. Snow melted slowly in his dark hair. His expression softened. "Come with me," he said. "Please." The words hung between them like the last breath before storm breaks. "Come with me." Evelyn stared at Lucian as snow drifted through the open doorway behind him. Her mind could not seem to catch up. Luke, the stranger in the black coat, the man who sat in her basement drinking soup from a chipped mug, the man who looked at her like she was something precious. He was the Alpha King. "You lied to me," she whispered. Lucian's face changed. Just for a second, the king disappeared, leaving only the man she had bandaged in the storage room. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." Around them, nobody moved. Mason was still on one knee. The royal guards stood like statues near the walls. Outside, the whole town watched through the falling snow. Evelyn felt suddenly exposed. Small. Foolish. "Why?" she asked. "Why come here at all?" Lucian took one step toward her. "Because I heard stories." She almost laughed. Bitter. Hurt. Stories about the woman who feeds rogues. No. His voice was softer now. Stories about a girl who never stopped being kind, even after the world gave her every reason to stop. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. He should not have known that. Nobody knew that. Nobody had cared enough to know. Lucian looked down briefly, as if choosing his next words carefully. "For months, I heard reports from towns across the kingdom. Rogues disappearing. Not dead. Not arrested. Federal sheltered. Helped. Every trail led here. To Black Hollow. To you." Mason looked up sharply. "Your Majesty, she hid criminals. Surely you do not." Lucian turned so slowly that the room seemed to freeze around him. "Do not finish that sentence." Mason fell silent immediately. Even the wind outside seemed quieter now. Lucian looked back at Evelyn. "I came here intending to shut this place down if the rumors were true." Her chest tightened. "Then why didn't you?" He smiled then. Small. Sad. Beautiful enough to hurt. "Because I walked through that door bleeding, exhausted, wearing a face no one would recognize." He stepped closer. "You did not ask who I was. You did not ask what I could give you. You saw a stranger. You saw someone hurting. Then you helped me." Evelyn could not breathe. The memory hit her all at once. The blood on his sleeve. The look in his eyes. The way he watched her hands while she wrapped the bandage around his arm, like he had never been touched gently before. "I would have helped anyone," she whispered. "I know," Lucian said. "That is why it mattered." For one long second, nobody spoke. Then Mrs. Harper's voice came quietly from somewhere. Outside the laundromat. "Evelyn." Evelyn turned. The old baker stood near the edge of the crowd with tears in her eyes. Beside her, the butcher looked pale. The woman who used to pull her daughter away now stared at Evelyn like she was seeing her for the first time. Not broken, not strange, not the daughter of a traitor. Something else. Someone else. Mason rose slowly from the floor. "This changes nothing," he said, though his voice no longer sounded certain. "People like her do not belong beside the Alpha King." A terrible silence followed. Evelyn felt every eye in town turned toward her. She looked down at her old coat, her snow-soaked boots, her trembling hands. Maybe Mason was right. Lucien belonged in palaces and newspapers and places full of gold. She belonged in the basement beneath an abandoned laundromat. Before she could stop herself, she took a step back. Lucien saw it instantly. Pain flashed across his face. Then he did something no one expected. The Alpha King, ruler of every pack in the kingdom, walked across the laundromat floor and dropped to one knee in front of her. Gasps rose from outside. Mason looked like he had forgotten how to breathe. Lucien looked up at Evelyn with those impossible silver eyes. "Then let me make this very clear," he said. "There is no place in this kingdom where you do not belong." Slowly, carefully, he held out his hand. For a moment, Evelyn could only stare at his hand. The Alpha King was kneeling in the middle of an abandoned laundromat with snow on his shoulders and his hand held out to her like she was the most important thing in the world. No one had ever looked at her the way Lucien did. Not with pity, not with curiosity, with certainty. Her heart hurt with it. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Warmth rushed through her, so suddenly she almost gasped. Lucien's fingers closed around hers like they belonged there. Around them, the entire town remained silent. Then Lucien stood and pulled off the heavy coat draped across his shoulders. The dark wool was lined with silver fur, the royal crest stitched over the heart. Without a word, he wrapped it gently around Evelyn's shoulders. It was still warm from his body. She looked up at him in surprise. "You are freezing," he said softly. The small kindness nearly undid her. Mason Reed took a sharp step forward. "Your Majesty, think carefully. She is not fit for the palace. She is not trained. She has no status, no family, no—" "Enough." Lucien did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The word hit the room like thunder. Mason stopped immediately. Lucien kept one hand around Evelyn's. "You speak of status as though it matters more than character," he said. "You speak of bloodlines while standing in front of the bravest woman in this town." He looked toward the crowd gathered outside. "Every one of you knew what she was doing. You knew she fed people in secret. You knew she gave away her food, her money, her time. While the rest of you looked away, she opened her door. Nobody spoke. Mrs. Harper lowered her head. The butcher looked suddenly ashamed. Even the woman with the little girl wiped at her eyes. Lucien turned back to Mason. "You called her weak because kindness frightened you. You called her nothing because you knew if people saw what she truly was, they would never follow men like you again." Mason looked down at the floor. For once, he had no answer. The wind blew harder through the broken doorway. Snow drifted across the tile in soft white lines. Lucien looked at Evelyn again. The anger was gone from his face now. Only that strange sadness remained. "I know I do not deserve your trust," he said quietly. "I came here wearing a lie." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Then why does it feel like I have known you forever?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Lucien's expression changed. Something warm moved through his silver eyes. "Because," he said softly, "you have." She frowned. Before she could ask what he meant, one of the older royal guards stepped forward from the doorway. His gray hair was dusted with snow. He looked from Lucien to Evelyn, then suddenly smiled. "I knew it was you," he whispered. Evelyn stared at him. She had never seen him before in her life. The old guard laughed softly at her confusion. 10 years ago," he said, "there was a boy hiding behind Miller's grocery after the harvest festival. He had run away from his escorts. He was cold, hungry, furious at the whole world." Lucien looked away. Evelyn's breath caught. She remembered. A boy around her age sitting alone behind the store with a torn jacket and angry silver eyes. She had found him crying after everyone else went home. She had given him the cinnamon roll she had been saving for herself. The memory came back all at once. The cold night. The way he refused to look at her at first. The way he finally whispered thank you. Evelyn looked up at Lucien. That was you. He nodded once. I never forgot you. The room disappeared again. The crowd. The snow. The guards. None of it mattered. 10 years. He had remembered her for 10 years. Then, very gently, Lucien lifted her hand and pressed something small into her palm. A silver key. Old. Worn smooth with age. What is this? She whispered. The first key to the sanctuary, he said. The one we're going to build together. No more hiding. No more darkness. No more feeding people in secret. His thumb brushed softly across her fingers. If you want it to. The silver key trembled in Evelyn's hand. Snow still drifted through the broken doorway. The town still stood frozen outside. Yet somehow everything had changed. The basement beneath the laundromat no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like the beginning of something. Evelyn looked down at the key, then back at Lucien. You would really do that? She whispered. Build a place for them. Lucien smiled softly. For them, he said. For you. Her eyes burned. She had spent so many years believing kindness had to be hidden, believing love came with conditions, believing she would always live in the shadows because that was where people like her belonged. But Lucien looked at her like the shadows had never suited her at all. Behind them, one of the teenage boys stepped slowly out of the basement. The younger one, the one who had nearly cried over the blueberry pie. He looked between Evelyn and Lucien with wide eyes. Does this mean we do not have to run anymore? The question shattered whatever was left of Evelyn's heart. Lucien turned toward the boy. Then, in front of the entire town, the Alpha King lowered himself until he was eye level with him. No, he said gently. You do not have to run anymore. A quiet sound moved through the crowd outside. Not laughter. Not whispers. Something softer. Shame. Relief. Hope. Mrs. Harper stepped forward first. She still wore her apron beneath her winter coat. In her hands was the paper bag she had tried to take back earlier that morning. Slowly, she crossed the street and held it out to the boy. I made fresh rolls tonight, she said quietly. The butcher came next, then the woman with the little girl. One by one, the people of Black Hollow crossed the street. Blankets, soup, flashlights. Somebody brought hot chocolate. Somebody else brought firewood. The town that had spent years turning away from Evelyn suddenly stood beside her. Not because they had changed overnight. Not because people become good all at once. Because one brave person had shown them what goodness looked like until they could no longer pretend not to see it. Mason Reed remained near the doorway, silent and alone. Snow gathered on his shoulders. For the first time in his life, nobody was looking at him. Lucien rose slowly and stepped back beside Evelyn. Their hands brushed. Warmth rushed through her again. Stronger this time. She looked down in surprise. A pale silver light shimmered beneath the sleeve of her coat, right above her wrist. Lucien saw it at the same moment. His breath caught. Slowly, he pushed back the edge of the sleeve. A mark glowed against Evelyn's skin. Delicate, beautiful, a silver crescent wrapped in twisting vines. The shape pulsed once beneath her heartbeat. Then again, the old royal guard went completely still. That cannot be, he whispered. Lucien looked up sharply. What is it? The guard stared at Evelyn like he was seeing a ghost. That mark. His voice shook. Only one bloodline ever carried that mark. The wind outside seemed to stop. Even the snow felt quieter. Evelyn looked down at the glowing symbol on her wrist. What bloodline? She whispered. The old guard swallowed hard. The Moonborn line. Mason's head snapped up. Across the street, several of the older townspeople suddenly looked afraid. Lucien stepped closer to Evelyn at once. The Moonborns are gone, he said. They disappeared almost 20 years ago. Not all of them, the guard whispered. He looked at Evelyn with tears shining in his eyes. Your Majesty, if she carries that mark. He stopped. Then, very slowly, he dropped to one knee in front of her. Around him, every royal guard did the same. Evelyn stared at them, unable to move. Lucien looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. Somewhere deep in the forest beyond Black Hollow, a wolf began to howl. Then another answered. Then another, as if the entire kingdom had just remembered her name.